Welcome everybody to the Publishers Panel. My name is Joe Compton. I run Nevermind the Fine Print, which is a multimedia company. We do publishing. We also do, I do multimedia, I make movies. I work with musicians. I am also a part of Go Indie Now, which is my creation. It's a network that I created to promote and help promote authors and artists, indie artists of all art forms. And I'm happy to be here, and I will be moderating this panel with all of these awesome folks. And why don't we introduce ourselves? Go ahead.
Sure. My name is Kelsey Attard. I'm the managing editor of Freehand Books, literary press based here in and we've been around for 10 years and publish literary fiction, short story collections, literary nonfiction, memoir, some poetry, but a pretty small list of 5 or 6 books a year. So we try to be very selective and receive far more great submissions than we can ever publish, unfortunately. But there's a lot of exciting talent, and we publish all only Canadian authors. That's also part of our mandate.
I'm Neil Enock. I'm actually an independent publisher. I kind of have a slightly different approach to indie publishing. I'm the guy that buys skids of books and expects to sell them, and but it works really well for me. So I think Randy threw me on the panel because I look at things a little differently. So.
My name is Ellen. Primarily, I am a freelance fiction editor, but I have also worked as managing editor for a very small press, and I'm launching an e-zine next month, so that's terrifying and soon. So I work primarily with first-time authors and 100% Canadian content as well within speculative fiction. And I work with a lot of short fiction specifically with the publishing side, and then edit novels.
With dirtbags like me.
Yes, exactly.
We're about to work together on an anthology for next year.
Yay!
I'm Axel Howerton, Coffin Hop Press. We publish, we have 2 lines. Basically, our motto is new crime, new weird, new pulp. We trend towards the pulpy throwback kind of stuff. We have a weird line, which is mostly, EC Comics, Twilight Zone kind of quirky, eclectic, weird fiction, weird westerns. We have a book of weird westerns, a book of weird Christmas stories. On our crime side, while we tend to go to the darker crime, noir, and neo-noir, we also publish anthologies and short story collections, novels. We have a line of dark crime novellas called Noirvellas. At this convention, we just launched a collection called The Dame Was Trouble, which features some of the best Canadian female crime writers, which has been, not to toot my own horn, but kind of the belle of the ball here this weekend, with some amazing authors, including Kelly Armstrong, Gail Bowen, and a lot of local authors, which is one of our mandates, is we try to build a core in an anthology around some solid established authors, and then take open submissions to fill spots around that to help emerging authors and help people kind of climb that hill as they go. And yeah, that's my story.
So this is a question I get quite often, and I'm sure you do as well. And I'm going off the seat of my pants, everybody. I was not prepared to be the moderator. I'm just, so bear with me. But how does one approach you? What is the best way to get your attention?
Be excited about your project. Like, for me, whenever I'm talking to someone, I need to see that passion behind your work, because if you're not excited about it, why should I be excited about it? Nice. So yeah, I'm super approachable, so just come up and talk to me and say, hey, I have this project, and just show that enthusiasm for it, and I'm way more likely to talk to you and look at your work.
Be polite and cordial. One of the big issues I have is, especially with submissions, email submissions, not as much in person, obviously, but there are still people that just walk up and say, I have this book, and they start telling you about their book and telling you the plot of their book and know who you're talking to. Because I have people come up all the time, they're trying to pitch me fantasy and science fiction, and they just walk up and stop right into the pitch, start talking about their book, and I'm like, whoa. I don't think you're talking to the right guy. We do crime, we do this. Know who you're talking to and be polite. At least, say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and especially in emails. There's no excuse to, in your email, not even have an address, to say hello. But I get hundreds of them where it's just the synopsis of the story, or my book would be great for your press. Here's the, details on my story and my publishing history and everything else. But you didn't even, take that 1 second to type hi. Be cordial, be presentable, research who you're talking to. I mean, it should all be common sense. I'm sure it is, but you'd be surprised how often that doesn't happen.
And the be excited thing is critical. We were talking in the sunny side up. When you first got a new project, you're writing a new book, that's when it's really exciting for you. And one of our suggestions on the panel there was keep your original draft, the notes that you made that got you going, and have your manuscript in that, but refer to that before you go into the room. Because that was when you were excited about it. Try and remember how excited you were, because you've been through it, and you've been through draft after draft. You might be a little jaded. Boost yourself up with what got you going in the first place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and use that to be confident. That's the other thing, is be confident when you're talking to a publisher, when you're talking to an editor, or whoever. Just,
I pitched at Five Rivers a couple of years ago, loved the book, and he said, and I'm independent, so he said, this is great. If we took it, it would be in 2020. This is in 2016, and I'm like, the look on my face was obvious. He said, well, how ready are you? I said, I'm going to press next month. He said, oh, yeah, you keep doing what you're doing. So but it was I pitched it, I was confident, because I was already going to press. I was there, and it was like, it was easy. So be confident. I mean, your work is great. So.
I guess for you, Kelsey, the most important thing is be Canadian, right?
That's important. Yeah, that's a key criteria. But also, you can have the best book in the world, but it's not going to be right for all 4 of us publishers or every publisher. In fact, that's something that I think sometimes writers really struggle with when they're starting out. Like, I have this book, it's so awesome, everyone should want to publish it, but all of us are not the right publisher. Like, I am not the right publisher to publish a fantasy novel. You do not want me to publish a fantasy novel. I would do a really terrible job of publishing and promoting a fantasy novel. So for you to approach me with that is not the best use of your time in terms of pitching, for sure. So demonstrating that you've done the research into who you're talking to, whether that's by coming up to someone in person or by looking at their backlist, getting a sense of what they're looking for. That's really key in terms of what we're looking for in terms of a submission. Kind of people who have some understanding of what we're doing and why that they fit in with what we're doing, and then also following the submission guidelines that we've outlined on our website. Sometimes some things are super picky and whatever. Like, do I actually care if something's in 12-point font instead of 11.5? No. Like, I don't really care, but I don't want it to be in, like, purple Comic Sans either, So, following that, doing what's kind of requested of you and just making sure it's the right match is really, really important from a lot of angles in terms of also being happy with the finished product and what you're getting out of that publishing process as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And even pitch sessions and blue pencils and things like that here, because again, I do crime and I do weird fiction, but I had people sign up for blue pencils and pitch sessions that were coming in with fantasy, and I'm trying to go over these edits on a fantasy manuscript, and I'm saying, look, there's different conventions in fantasy that I'm not entirely familiar with because that's not what I do, and this may be okay in fantasy, but with what we do, we would cut all this out and we would change this. And I know for a fact that if he took that to a fantasy editor, they would be much softer on it, much more inclined to leave those things in. So, you know, it's not really doing a justice to your work to take it to the wrong people either.
Absolutely, I'll agree with that. At Creative Inc. in May, I was doing pitch sessions and blue pencils specifically for science fiction fantasy, and I had 3 people come to me with literary women's fiction. It's like, this is not at all close to what I do. So, yeah, just do the research.
I would add to that, listen, you know, listen to what you're being told, because we all want to help you. We're not out to just say, you know, goodbye, don't talk to me ever again. You know, me personally, if you approach me and ask me, you know, is this right for you? And I say no, but maybe I can help you find the person that is right for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's the great thing about the indie community for me, is that we're a community. And you know, I have many resources. I know many people. Axel, I know very well. So, you know, we connected. And so we connect with each other. So if I know that you're doing a certain thing, I can help you get to that point. So listen to what you're being told, and don't take it personal, you know, because most of the time it's not personal.
And then to just add something that, I don't know, people know, the buyers in the big chains, they all buy from specific publishers for their genre. So when you go outside the genre of the publisher, you're actually, they really can't help you because they don't deal with those buyers. They would have to go outside their thing. So there's more than just this person does not carry that thing. They're not set up for it. They're dealing with Dave at Indigo, and he buys this stuff, and he does this, and yeah, you might have a great personal relationship, which is why the publisher's doing well with the retail markets and the distributors. But if you don't have the right mix, it's not. It might get great far, but it won't go all the way because you've got the wrong
And
channel.
most of us small publishers, we're designed from the beginning to do a certain kind of publishing, a certain niche genre or, you know, style that we're pushing. And to go outside of that, it really just kind of, you don't, it's like if McDonald's decided to start selling lobster thermidor, right? People may buy it that go to McDonald's already, but it's not going to bring new customers to McDonald's because they have lobster thermidor. The usual lobster thermidor crowd is not going to go to McDonald's, right? And just to add to what Joe was saying before,
But it works.
especially at a venue like this, you know, listen to what we're saying and be open to what we're telling you, because when we come to things like this, we're here specifically to help emerging writers and help foster the community. And, you know, if we're here offering to do pitch sessions and blue pencils for free, chances are we want to help you. And if we don't do what you are trying to put out there, we will tell you who is here that you should talk to. And most of us know each other well enough that I can say, oh yeah, go talk to, you know, Margaret at Tyke, or go talk to Sandra at Cheesy, you know, and we can give you that connection. So be open to that.
What is the biggest misnomer that you think people don't know about the publishing industry that they should?
It takes a long time to put together a book. I think that's one that I've come across a lot. People are like, oh, so we've submitted, and okay, so you've accepted my story for this anthology. It's being published in like 4 months, right? No. No. It takes a lot longer than that.
Unless you do it the way I do it. Which is seat of the pants.
Well, yeah. You can, but generally speaking, it takes a lot longer.
Yeah, I wouldn't even recommend it.
Put a book together.
I'm just doing an anthology with Edge as an editor, and they're, yeah, it's been, I've never done an anthology before, so I'm learning how to do it. They're learning how I do it. I had a partner editor who was going to help, and so he backed out, so now I'm on my own. And so we're like, I don't know, 6 months behind, but we've rescheduled it and it's going well. But yeah, there's a whole timing thing. I get this, as an indie, seat of the pants all the way. But when you get into the publishing world, the biggest thing I see that people don't maybe know about publishing, and not from my experience, but from I've been working with the anthology and talking to other people, is the money side of things. How much money and how time publishers, I'd say 6 months is your average to get paid, because the publisher puts the books to the distributor puts the books to the retailers take 90, 120 to pay the distributors, and then the distributors take another 60 anyway. So the biggest thing is a lot of people go, why wouldn't I go indie? Well, publishers are absorbing massive amounts of money, and this is this is talking to the bigger publishers, and I know I have an acquaintance who went directly as an indie to Indigo. Let's just say he's not going to be doing that anymore because they have played him the same way they play the publishers, but he's independent, and they've tied up so much of his money and inventory that he does. But he went in just as an indie. He went in as an indie distributor, and that's when the hell started. He's thinking, I'm going to be in all the Indigo stores, and it's great. He did, but they return his books every 120 days, and then reorder them.
Yeah.
So that way, you never actually have to pay for it.
And there's all kinds of little tricks like that, and that's just speaking of the like traditional distribution into chain bookstores. Even when you're talking about Amazon or Kobo or anything like that for ebooks, we do it the same way that indie publisher doing it themselves and indie author doing it themselves would. It still takes us, we get sales reports after 3 months, and then we get paid sometime after that, within a few weeks, and it trickles in from a bunch of different places. So by the time we're actually doing a quarterly report for the second quarter, like I'm doing second quarter reports next week, which is for April, May, and June, right? So I'm doing the reports then. I finally have sales figures in. Doesn't mean I have the money from Amazon and Kobo and those places. And then it takes another few weeks before we can process all that and pay it out to the authors. So it is a good 6 months at least between when somebody buys that ebook for $1 and when we get our 35 cents and when you get your 12 cents.
Yeah, we're currently signing books for fall 2020. So that's how far in advance we're working out, and that's not unusual. That's not, of course, some places can do it and will do it sooner, and we certainly have to in some circumstances, but that is something that surprises a lot of people initially, that's the kind of lead time that we're working with 2 years out. And then just all of the financial stuff, I'm sure we could spend the next 3 hours just talking about the financial fun of being a book publisher.
Commiserating.
But just the fact that bookstores can return books to publishers is something that is shocking to many people, because it's a terrible system for publishers and authors, really, but that's the model that we are in traditional bricks and mortar bookselling are stuck with. So that does mean that when we put out a brand new book, it's great. Chapters will order, well, not always, but let's say that they order 800 copies of this book, and it's in Chapters and Indigo across the country, and everything's going great, and then in 6 months they return 3/4 of that amount all of a sudden, or even worse, maybe 2 years from now they return 3/4 of the books, even though they're not supposed to, and they're supposed to have, it's supposed to be under 6 months or a year or whatever the terms are. In this situation that we have currently, where we only have one major national retail chain and Amazon, when you're a small player, they can do things like that even though they're not supposed to. So it's a tricky situation and difficult for publishers, for sure, and for authors as well, because it eventually trickles down and hurts everyone.
And I would add that it doesn't stop and end with, hey, I got a publishing deal, okay, now I can go and do whatever, and they can deal with that. You have to be as much involved in the process as they are. You have to market, you're your best marketing tool. So putting yourself out there and making sure that you help your publisher with social media and the aspects of that, you have to still be involved in all that. It doesn't just stop because you got a publishing deal.
Yeah, I know, and there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, I've got a publisher now. I don't have to do marketing." That maybe 30 years ago, 40,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah,
I was
if you
in
have
the
a
book
big
business.
deal, even if you're a big publisher,
Yeah.
they require a lot of them now they ask you to give them your social media stats, so they're sure that you will be part of that
Yeah.
process.
And not only that, people expect, oh, I'm going to go on they're going to send me on a book tour, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. No. Unless you're James Patterson or Michael Chabon or, someone of that echelon that's like a New York Times bestseller with millions of books being sold, they don't pay for that stuff. Even if you're with, Howerton Mifflin or Penguin, they'll say, well, we can arrange a trip for you, and you still have to pay to get yourself there. You still have to, take care of all of those incidentals. They'll put the books in the store for you. They'll print posters and have, people that are arranging to work with the bookstore to let people know that you're going to be there. But they're not paying for you to run around the country and do appearances, and they're not flying you anywhere. You're paying for all that stuff yourself. And obviously, if that's the case with Penguin, as you scale it down to people like us, we can't afford to put you up in a hotel in Medicine Hat because you want to do an appearance in Medicine Hat, right? I mean, a lot of us work with publicists that will do a lot of that work and get you out there, and they'll arrange those kind of things. But again, a lot of that stuff, a lot of that footwork has to be on you, just because, we don't have 10,000 employees like Penguin. We don't have $10 billion like Penguin.
You don't have a travel department?
We don't have a travel department. Probably don't
Or
even have
expense.
insurance.
Well, I know actually 2 or 3 authors that are sitting on their submissions because they're submitting to big houses and small, and they're sitting there going, well, as soon as they submit it, I'm good. And
Yeah.
they're literally, that's their thoughts. And it's like, I had a long conversation with Robert Sawyer, who's well published. He's working with other alternate publishers for other books to see how their marketing is, and he's Patreoning his next book. So even the big names are looking around because the major houses are not doing what they used to do anymore.
Yeah.
It's up to you. So if you want to be an author and be successful, regardless of publishing, a publisher will take a lot of heat off of you, but you will still have to do. The more you market your book yourself through your social media, the better your book will do it, regardless of which way you go. And that's, I don't think there's anything.
And correct
would
me
you
if
agree?
I'm wrong, but if you're a publisher and you see that, you're more apt to do another book with that person.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. And the people and even taking that book in the first place. Even small presses, we're going to look and see what kind of media presence you have, how you relate with people, what kind of work you're already doing to promote yourself, and that'll factor into whether we want to print your book or not.
So if you bring a marketing plan and you say to the publisher with your submission, this is what I want to do, that
Yeah.
would be a leg up. I mean, obviously your
That's a big
submission's
plus.
gonna be good,
That's a
obviously.
big plus. But I mean, if it comes down to we can print, one of these 4 books, and the 4 books are great, but this one author has already put stuff out. They're already a little bit known. They're willing to get out there and hustle, and they have a big Twitter following and Instagram and everything else. And they have everything already set up, and they have author pages, and they have a website that looks good, and we know that they're going to help carry that load. That's the one we're going to veer towards, regardless of how good the other 3 books are, because that's what we can sell. And in the end, as much as we love putting out books, and small presses aren't doing it because we're making millions of dollars. We're doing it because we love books and we want to put things out there. And Coffin Hot Press, I know we want to put out the things that we enjoy and that we really like and we feel strongly about, and we want to support and we want to promote to the world. But we also still have to make it, or we're personally going to go bankrupt and ruin our lives. So I like you guys. I probably like your work, but my kids got to eat.
There's some questions.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just say, we ask for, with our submission guidelines, we ask for a short marketing summary or kind of evaluation. And that's something that we take into consideration when evaluating, what we're going to publish. It's not the deciding factor. And we're not, not every book and author should be marketed in the same way. Not everyone needs a Twitter account. And you can tell the people who have Twitter just because they've been told that they need to, and it's not something they like or are good at. I don't want one of my authors who's not going to be good at Twitter to be putting time and energy into it if they hate it and if it's awful for them. Everyone has a different something that's going to work for them. and what kind of shines through more in those kind of marketing plans than whether, you know, have they ticked off all the social media boxes is not necessarily, you know, what we're looking for or what I'm looking for, but like, have they given some thought to who is going to buy this book and how are we going to reach them? Like, how we're going to do it collaboratively together. So then that kind of gives us a little peek about how this author will be like to work with, if we'll be a good fit together, and our approaches, rather than just, you know, trying to go after the numbers and trying to rack up 1 million Instagram followers or whatever before you are publishing.
Yeah. And do you understand that you'll have to do some of those things,
Yeah.
you know?
All right, so let's open it up to questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about the whole thing. If a person is going to do their own marketing, and this is part of the reason that your publishing houses are steering towards my book rather than some not doing it, what's the big advantage to having a publishing house? It seems to me that the whole publishing idea was to market. Not only that, obviously.
Can I go?
Sure.
I'll use the example of my friend who is a very successful indie author, and he decided he'd go a little further and deal directly as an independent distributor chapters. And he's basically making way less money and taking way longer to get paid. He's actually in some ways becoming less successful because of that. So he's pulling back from that deal. And in my experience, and I'm relating this not as a publisher, but as an indie author, but working with publishers, they take a lot of heat. They do the planning years in advance. They're going to fund the purchase of an inventory of books for you. A lot of people aren't crazy like me. Like, I'll put thousands into every book I publish. I buy a skid or two of, and honestly, I make great money when I sell a single book. But I can only hit this big a market because I'm indie. I can't put books into Toronto. No store in Toronto is going to take them because unless I end up with an article in the New York Times or something. So the publisher has distribution already. And as we said earlier, distribution within the market for your book, because that's that kind of publisher. So there's hundreds of advantages. It used to be really advantageous, and now it's this advantageous. But the marketing, yeah, it's up to you. So really, if you want to be a successful author, I would say you've got to do your own marketing. I don't think is there an option anymore?
Well,
No.
again, if you're Michael Chabon.
But then you're already there,
Yeah.
and you've already done the
But I
marketing.
mean,
what they've done
there
before.
are these, you know,
Yeah, there are
extraneous, rare cases where somebody becomes a social media star, they get some huge amount of attention for something else, and then they put out a book, and Penguin says, oh, we're going to put out your book, and it sells 1 billion copies, and, you know, they're a best-selling author.
See,
Good for them, but for somebody that's actually trying to be an author, and that's their main focus, and they're trying to work at it by putting out books and getting someone to help them meet the market, you're not going to be noticed in this sea of millions of people. And, you know, another one of my obscure metaphors here. It's like if you wanted to open a gas station. You open a gas station and it's just mom and pop's no-name gas station. Sure, people in the neighborhood are going to come and stop and get gas. But if there's a Shell station down the road and a Petro can down the road and a whatever down the road, a lot of people are going to go to the sign. They're going to go to the thing that they recognize. And, you know, while Coffin Hop Press may not be like a globally known entity in, you know, New York Times best-selling books, we do enough that we get recognition and we start getting, you know, noticed by people like Otto Penzler, who does the year's best mysteries, or we start getting noticed by Ellery Queen magazine, or things like that, right? And then they're keeping an eye on us, and we're getting our name out there, and slowly our logo, our name becomes something that people, at least in the industry, know of, and that makes it easier to get through those gatekeepers to promote your stuff. For you as just an indie, you know, Joe Schmo wrote this book, you try to go to Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, you try to go to Quill and Choir, you try and go to Chapters even, and say, oh, well, here's my book. They're going to say, okay, yeah, great, thanks, we'll put it in the pile over there. Whereas if they see it come from a known entity, they're more likely to actually look at it. And we develop all those relationships so that you don't have to. Exactly.
Not to mention all of the other upfront costs that publishers take on. Like, you as an indie author, if you're going to self-publish, you have to hire your editors, you have to hire your cover designers, you have to hire someone to do the interior of your book. You have to pay for a publisher. They're taking on those costs up front.
That's right. I do
So-
all that for free.
Exactly. So do I. So, when you're indie versus traditional, you don't have all of those extra upfront costs before you're able to even print your book. Like Neil was saying, he pays to print all of his books. That's just one expense you have to take on as an indie author.
I pay my editors, I pay for cover design, I do my own layout, because I know how.
Yeah.
So you're an entrepreneur ultimately because you
Yeah, it rhymes with idiot sometimes.
We all are.
In the traditional model, though,
Yeah.
it's becoming more partnership than it was before, like you said.
I am an independent businessman, I always have been, always will be, so to me, it's a no-brainer. But I was thinking, if, like I'm working with Edge, on it's Edge's book, the Fantastic Trains Anthology, and I'm thinking to myself, and I'm just literally, even this weekend, talking to Brian, thinking, geez, I wonder if he'd like to actually pick up one of my next books. And then I have to think about if I want to do that. So,
And honestly, something else to keep in mind is, you go with a small press, we're more likely to pay you a higher royalty rate on a regular basis. If you get your book with Penguin, good for you. You're going to get probably better exposure than I can give you initially. But if your book, they'll give you a small advance, say $5,000, against your royalties, which are going to be 1, 2, maybe 10% of their net profit after they take out marketing and everything else. And, by the time you get that royalty, it's cents on a copy. And by the time that cents on a copy translates to enough sales to pay off your $5,000 advance, if you're that lucky, you're still only making cents on a copy.
And they're probably not marketing your book anymore because they have a new front list by then.
Exactly. And if you don't earn out that advance, it's pretty hard to convince them to print another one of your books. And then that whole relationship is kind of, right? Whereas we understand that we're not going to sell 1 billion of your books, but if we believe in it and we like it, we're doing it more to get that out there and put out a quality product than a bigger publisher probably would, because they are inherently money-making machine. It's entirely a business, and most of them are giant conglomerates, and all they care about is if they can make money on it.
And you're more likely to continue selling your backlist. With a large publisher, you have your book in the front list, it's all shiny and new and exciting, and then as soon as they have a new front list, your book just kind of gets shuffled back into
And
the
the
corner.
bookstores literally rip the cover off and throw it in the garbage.
Whereas with
Bargain bin.
with small publishers, they're more likely to continue promoting their backlist. So
And there's not a one-size-fits-all model either, like anymore now, because indie publishing and self-publishing there's so many options that it might make more sense for you to publish your book yourself than to come to a publisher. It's not like it's a in every situation there's only one thing to consider and to get into that
absolutely.
decision.
I have a couple of questions. First one is, as Canadian small press, do you guys have access to U.S. distribution system? It's number one. Number two, are you open to work with agents?
For freehand, we do have our distribution in Canada is way better. We do have a distribution agreement in the States. We do have a distributor in the States. We don't have great sales in the States. It's not our specialty, and it's not what we're focusing on either, being like Canadian author only focused. We're very open to working with agents. In fact, one of the trends that we've noticed lately in the past couple of years is that we're receiving more and more and more submissions from agents. That doesn't mean that we're only receiving submissions from agents. We also accept non-agented submissions. But a trend seems to be that, I don't know what's going on with agents. I think it's really that the big publishers are not signing as much and offering lower and lower advantages, and especially in the field of literary fiction, which doesn't sell in the huge numbers. It's a more specialized market, so that the larger publishers like Penguin, they're being told they have to be very selective with the number of books. So then there's kind of other tiers of agented literary submissions that are coming down to publishers like Freehand, and we're receiving a lot of them. Whereas we used to get, a couple submissions from a given agent in any given year, it's now like 5 or 6 every few months that we're seeing come from, our regular agents who we work with. So.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say no just because you had an agent. And as far as distribution goes, we have availability in the States, and our books would be available anywhere in North America, across Europe, globally. But we don't necessarily have the relationships with specific companies in the States or abroad that they will automatically carry our books in their stores. Our books will be available there, just like with Chapters. If we haven't actually placed a book with Chapters, you can still, because of the new distribution model through print on demand and Amazon and things like that, you can still go into Chapters and order those books, whether it's on the shelf or not. And you can still get those books through Chapters, whether it's on the shelf or not. And that's true globally. But having an actual relationship where we can convince them to use shelf space for us is a little sketchier, and it depends on the book. It depends on how much notice we've picked up from those distributors. The nice thing is, once something starts to build up steam, they start coming to you and asking to be able to carry those things.
I did a little research on U.S. distribution as an indie, and I cannot remember the name of the company. There's 2 or 3 big companies in the States that do distribution, and there is a way in. I figured it would cost me half a skid of books and assorted, and then I think about $1,500 just to get set up and running. But once you're running, you're in their catalogs, you're good to go.
Yeah.
But then you have no marketing. So unless you have an audience, again, wherever it comes from, and it's in the channel, and you may or may not get picked up. You may get them back because there's return deals on all of them, and the margins are far lower than going as an indie to the, Signal Hill.
Yeah.
And I wanted to address you mentioned about how to get out there. I want to say cross-marketing. Don't ever forget that. If you are a school teacher, your kids are part of your market. That's a lousy example. I'll get the only example I have is I have a short film being screened in Amsterdam at a film festival today. So if it happens to win the film festival, I expect to sell more books. So cross-marketing, always. If you're good at something and you're already doing it, don't stop that. Keep those connections open. Again, indie or with a publisher, you are going to backstop them. You're going to back them up.
One of our best books right now is Sean Bird's Murdering Mr. Edwards. Is one of our best sellers right now because she is a teacher who wrote a book about high school, and teachers are buying that up like crazy because it's part of their own milieu and they're interested in that, and it's been so easy to market that to that specific group. No problem. Also, she is a high-ranking member of the Diana Gabaldon fan club or cult, whatever. I'm kidding. She was here last year, and I met her, and she is lovely beyond imagination. But Sean has so many connections from that world that those people too, and we managed to get a cover blurb from Diana, which was amazing. But those people, now we have access to all of her fans who are buying that book because of Sean's, place in that world. Doesn't really have anything to do with her book, but because she could network that way, that networking has paid off unbelievably for that book. So don't discount any of those kind of things that you may have connections and networking in.
If I could add, if you're an indie and you need help marketing, come see me. Go Indie Now.
For sure.
I do it for free, and I have several ways I can help you market. So if you want to do that, come talk to me. I'll give you a brochure.
We can do a whole nother panel on that. I think there's a couple more.
Yeah.
Lex,
sorry.
I was wondering, because small presses in Canada are much easier to submit to, they're much more approachable. Do small presses seek relationships with larger houses? Is that something you should look for when you're submitting to them? Like, I guess on the back end of the business, if you were a small press, do you look to form a relationship? That's almost like a subsidiary agent.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in my experience, forming a relationship with a bigger house means that you did well enough that they bought you out.
Yeah.
That's kind of the only way that happens, because they don't want, otherwise your competition. and they don't want to have anything to do with you. They want to just shut you down. But if you're doing well enough that they've noticed and they can fold you in and make you an imprint, and they do this a lot, where you think you're dealing with a small press, but it's actually a third level subsidiary of Penguin or Howerton Mifflin or Titan or whoever. And you know, there's so many little imprints that are actually part of those conglomerates, and it's hard to weed out sometimes. But you know, for a small press, if you're an actual small press, once you're dealing with a bigger house, it's that they're taking you over, basically.
And so the big houses do kind of shop at small presses.
Oh yeah, for sure. Once they see that there's sharks in the water, you know, once they see that there's somebody there, once there's a little pool of fish, there's food feeding over here, they want it, and they'll come after it and
Especially
they'll
if
pick it
it's
up.
a niche that they don't yet have an imprint
Yeah.
for, because then they realize that they're missing a piece of the market and they can't have it, so they will buy you up.
There's on the internet somewhere I saw a diagram of the 6 main companies, their subsidiaries, and the hundreds and hundreds of presses they own. All the lines. It's I don't know what you can search
Yeah.
on, but it's on there. It's hundreds and hundreds of presses.
How can you know what's a small press is not affiliated with a big?
Usually there has to be that little fine print on the inside of the book, but a lot of times you really don't know unless you really research the company.
Which you should be doing if you're
Yeah.
submitting to them.
And I
Yeah.
think there was another question back there.
Yes, back to the marketing. And, just wondering if any of you have used NetGalley or tried it or heard something like that or experienced it.
I did for the first time for a book this spring that came out. So NetGalley is a site where you can post electronic advance reading copies of a book, and then you as the publisher or the indie author who has posted it there, people request it, and you can vet like who you allow to read it, basically. It's a huge community of people. I did it for a book from a Calgary writer here. Her name's Allie Bryan. The book was called The Figs. It's a funny domestic comedy that we had Canadian and US rights for. So I kind of did it as an experiment to see how it went. It was very successful. I got tons of requests, tons of reviews popping up on book blogs everywhere. It was also very expensive. What did it come? I mean, for Canadian, it was nearly $1,000 for one title. If you're a bigger publisher with lots of titles, there's you can put all your books on there for a certain amount anyway. But to do a one-off like that, it was nearly $1,000 by the time everything was considered in. So was it worth it? I don't know. It's hard to say. For that price, I'm not going to do it for every book, most certainly, and be very, very selective about what books that I'd use it for. And I did mostly reach book bloggers and librarians through it rather than traditional media. I still had to do my traditional mail outs to the major media and direct contacts that way.
I don't know.
You know, and it depends on your genre as well, because there are genres, and it's the same with things like BookBub. There are little niches that your book may be in that those people don't go to BookBub, they don't go to NetGalley, so you won't get much of a response. Some of those niches will be well served there. That's why if you go to BookBub and you have a mystery book, you put it in the mystery category, you're paying, substantially more, like factors of 10 more than you would pay for any other genre, because there's so many mystery readers that get their stuff from BookBub.
There's I don't know what you call it, there's a feeling out there in the marketing industry, if you would, and you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a general feeling that if something worked really well for somebody just recently, it's done. By the time you get to doing that, people have moved on, or yes, they've got 1 million people, and now you're just another 1 in a million for someone to find. So if you catch a trend at the beginning, you'll do really well with it. But generally, I mean, a BookBub used to be awesome when it first came out, and now I haven't heard anybody having success on there.
Yeah.
Because what I see is the big houses get in, and they go, oh, that worked really well. they dump all their titles.
they flood it.
And all of a sudden, you're a tadpole in an ocean. So if you can find a niche or something starting out, that's kind of weird, let's try that. That's maybe the one to look for, because it might take and it might not, but if you happen to be on the crest of the first wave, you'd probably get noticed, so.
And that happened in the film industry with Sundance Film Festival.
Mhm.
Sundance Film Festival was the way to get discovered as you're an indie filmmaker. But now you have to know somebody to get your film. You can submit your film, but I guarantee you it'll never be seen by anybody. You have to know somebody actually to get it seen. So that's very true.
It's true with a lot of the film festivals. Now there's a million film festivals. I've been
Yeah.
submitting mine all over the world, and it's the same with book contests.
Yeah.
There's so many people submitting to so many. But the internet makes it very easy to submit all over the world, and these guys are making a fortune on submissions. But they're still only choosing 20, 30 films
Yeah.
or books.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a game. It's a game, and you have to play it wisely,
just
play it with passion.
Just be smart, do your research, and you'll find a trend that you can stay ahead of, or be in from the beginning. There are ones out there. I mean, hashtagging has become that kind of idea too. You hashtag something, and then millions of people hashtag it, and all of a sudden they take it down because it's run its course, and so you have to be ahead of the hashtags and things like that as well. So there's ways to do that. So there's sites out there. You just got to Google it, top trends or whatever.
I think the number one thing is market through what you already do, even
Yeah.
if it's not in writing,
Yeah.
especially if it's not in writing. Because they cross. People want to know what you are doing as an author. So again, regardless of where they're published, if you're really good at this, keep doing that. Let these people know you're doing this, and that they will be your best audience.
Yeah.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Other than the issues that have already been mentioned, what are the advantages working with small press than big publishers?
Well, we'll usually, if we take your book, it's because we're interested in it and because we believe in it, and we're going to give you more care, and we're going to be more hands-on with it, and we're going to put more love into it. As I say, the big publishers, they're a machine that's designed to make money, and you're one more product that they're trying to sell. That's it. So in the end, while you might get access, if your book is great and it gets picked up by Penguin, they may give you access to the best editors, the best marketing team, everything else. But if you don't play out right away, they're just going to drop you and they're never going to talk to you again. Whereas, while we may not be able to offer that level of service right off the bat, we're probably not going to abandon you if the book doesn't sell 1 million copies in 6 weeks. If you don't make the New York Times bestsellers list, we're just going to come to you and say, well, we're doing okay. We're going to keep working at it. Here's some other ideas, and we're going to keep trying.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
Small publishers are also more accessible to emerging writers at earlier stages of their careers. Well, certainly not always easy. I definitely wouldn't say always easy, but it's easier to make those contacts and make those connections and get that first book, say, with a smaller publisher. And hopefully have a long relationship. We've had both ways. We've had authors who come to us and we continue working with them and publish several of their books and really part of developing their career. And in some cases, we publish a first book and it is a hit and they get picked up by Penguin Random House and go on to great things. And so, that's always kind of like, oh, darn, they're not still with us. But still, you celebrate that they're getting to this new level of their career, access to new audiences. Both ways are exciting and rewarding as a publisher.
You may not see it, but all of those big authors at the big publishing houses with a hit that's in every Safeway on earth, like Patrick DeWitt with Sister Brothers. He had 1 or 2 or 3 small press books that came out before that, while he was building up and learning how to write a book that good, before he got picked up by an agent and then got picked up by that big publisher. So we're kind of that proving ground where you can work on your work, you can hone your talents and have somebody that helps you along if that's your goal, is to get to Penguin.
I think that getting the door too, you know, the number of authors that would be approaching Penguin compared to the number of authors that are approaching a small press. And again, the focus issue. A small press is going to have focus for your genre. Penguin may have a subdivision somewhere, but is that who you're talking to? So do you want to be one in 100,000, or do you want to be one in 500 or 200 or 100? So I think it's focus and passion. Small press is going to bring passion to your project that the big press literally cannot.
Yeah, you're far more likely to have a more positive, better, closer relationship with your publisher if you're dealing with a small press. You're more likely to be talking directly to the people who are actually working on your cover, working on the edits for your book, working on the marketing, as opposed to talking to someone's assistant or intern at a large company.
And circling back to one of the first things we talked about, try and be patient with us and remain polite, because, you know, and it's a small press. There may only be
1 or 2
10 people or 2 people. You know, Coffin Hop Press really is 2 people. You know, we do work with other editors and things, but there's literally 2 of us that do most of the work. Chances are, you know, if I don't get back to you in, you know, 35 seconds or 3 hours or 3 days even, it's not that I'm ignoring you. It's that, you know, we have so many other things going on. You know, I'm sorry, I'm doing it as fast as I can.
All right, everybody, that's our time. So thank you
Thank you very much for coming.
You guys are awesome.